What is the nature of consciousness? Buddhism's answer. When the Buddha spoke about consciousness, vijnana in Pali, he gave a very simple meaning: that which knows an object. Consciousness is not a container, a space, or a hidden self where experience lives. It is the very act of knowing itself. It is an activity, a process, a function that appears when there is something to be known. Just as cutting is not a separate thing, but what happens when a sharp edge meets an object. Consciousness is what happens when a sense organ meets an object and attention is present. The Buddha spoke of 6 kinds of consciousness, each based on its own conditions. Eye consciousness, with eye and visible forms. Ear consciousness with ear and sounds. Nose consciousness with nose and smells. Tongue consciousness with tongue and tastes. Body consciousness with body and touches. And mind consciousness with mind and thoughts or mental images. Each kind arises only when its causes come together, and each passes away when they separate. So consciousness is always about something. It never stands alone. Right now, as you read, eye consciousness knows shapes and colors, and mind consciousness knows meanings. If you look for a separate knower behind this, you cannot find one. There is only the act of knowing itself, just seeing, just knowing. You can picture consciousness like the beam of a flashlight. The beam is there only when it shines on an object. If there is nothing to light up, there is no beam. In the same way, consciousness and its object arise together and depend on each other. Right now, your eye consciousness appears because 3 conditions are present: a working eye, words on a screen, and attention turned toward them. If you close your eyes or look away or lose interest, eye consciousness does not appear. It is not hiding anywhere, waiting. It is born fresh each time the conditions meet, and it ends as soon as they break apart. The early teachings say, consciousness is named according to the conditions through which it arises. When it arises because of eye and forms, we call it eye consciousness. When it arises because of ear and sounds, we call it ear consciousness, and so on. The type of consciousness is fully shaped by the conditions that give rise to it. This understanding cuts deeply into our usual view of ourselves. It shows that consciousness is not the solid core of who we are, not an eternal soul or unchanging observer sitting behind experience. It is a changing process, appearing and vanishing moment by moment, completely dependent on causes, with no existence of its own. Yet consciousness is hard to see clearly, because it is the very lens through which everything else is seen. When you try to look at consciousness, you must still use consciousness to know it, like an eye trying to see itself. There is another difficulty: speed. By the time the thought "I am conscious" appears, that exact moment of consciousness is already gone. What we usually meet is only the memory of a moment of knowing, not the live moment itself. This great speed produces a strong illusion. Because we cannot notice each tiny moment of consciousness arising and falling, they happen too fast. We feel there is one smooth, unbroken stream. But this sense of continuity is only a trick of speed. In even a blink of an eye, countless mind moments arise and pass away, each one new, each one different. It is like watching a film. We see steady movement on the screen, yet it is formed from many still images flashing so quickly that the gaps disappear for us. In the same way, what feels like one continuous awareness is actually a rapid series of separate moments of consciousness flowing on. If this is so, then the person you remember from just a moment ago, those moments of consciousness, has already vanished. The one who is reading this very sentence will also disappear in the next instant. There is no single fixed you traveling unchanged through time, only this rapid series of arising and passing. The Buddha compared consciousness to a river. We say, the Ganges River, as if it were one thing, but at every second, new water flows in and old water flows out. No drop remains. The pattern looks stable, yet the content is never the same twice. Consciousness is just like this. The overall pattern of a person seems continuous, while the actual moments of knowing are always changing, never repeating, flowing on without a solid owner. Now we look at what the Buddha saw when he looked deeply into consciousness. He saw that consciousness, like all conditioned things, shows three universal marks: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not self, anatta. Here we focus on how these three marks appear directly in your own awareness. When they are seen clearly, the sense that consciousness is me or mine begins to fade. The first mark is anicca, impermanence. The Buddha observed, all day and night, what arises is different, what passes is different. Every moment of consciousness is new. It does not slowly change. It is replaced. Among the five aggregates, consciousness changes the fastest. The body can hold roughly the same shape for many years. Consciousness cannot last even for one heartbeat. In the time you snap your fingers, countless moments of knowing have already appeared and disappeared. If you sit quietly and watch your mind, you can taste this. Thoughts come from nowhere, stay briefly, and vanish. Even when you think, I am watching my breath, the knowing of the in-breath is gone before the out-breath begins. One moment does not turn into the next. One ends, another begins. The second mark is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Here dukkha means cannot give lasting satisfaction. Consciousness as a natural process is not a problem. The problem starts when we try to turn it into me or mine, when we build an identity on top of it and cling to it as a solid ground. The early teachings do not say consciousness is suffering. They say clinging consciousness is suffering. Consciousness that is grasped as self. Then life becomes heavy. You try to remain the one who is aware. You try to keep your attention steady, to hold a happy state, to keep a clear mind when you are tired. But awareness keeps slipping. Joy fades. The mind clouds over. You feel responsible for something that is changing faster than you can hold it, like trying to catch smoke in your hands. This shows the third mark, anatta, not self. In the Anattalakkana Sutta, the Buddha asks, in effect, if consciousness were self, could you say, let my consciousness be like this, let it not be like that? Clearly, you cannot. You cannot stop consciousness from arising when its conditions are present. You cannot order it to be bright when you are exhausted, or pleasant when pain is here. In each moment, sounds enter awareness, whether you want them or not. Thoughts arise without your permission. Many people still say, but I experience consciousness, so how is it not me? When you look for a separate owner of experience, what do you actually find? Only more moments of awareness. Consciousness, knowing consciousness. There is no fixed observer standing outside the flow, only the flow itself. Even the thought, I am the one who is conscious, is just another short-lived event in consciousness. The Buddha also taught that consciousness is completely dependent on conditions. In dependent origination, it sits in the middle of a chain. It is created by what comes before it, and conditions what comes after it. I consciousness appears only when a working eye, a visible object, and attention come together. If one is missing, I consciousness does not arise. In deep sleep, the needed conditions are absent, so ordinary consciousness does not appear. Consciousness is not hiding inside you, waiting to come back. It is born each time conditions meet, and it ends when they separate. Think of fire. Fire is not stored inside wood, or in air, or in heat. Fire is what happens when certain conditions meet. When those conditions separate, the fire does not go somewhere else. It simply stops. Consciousness is the same. It is a relationship, a process, not a solid thing. Because it depends completely on conditions, it has no permanent core that exists by itself. When you look closely in meditation, you do not find a stable thing called consciousness. You find only conditions coming together, a moment of knowing arising, and then fading away. When this is seen again and again in your own experience, not only as an idea, the habit of identification begins to loosen. You stop trying to be consciousness. You stop defending it as me and mine. You see it simply as a natural event, arising and passing according to causes, with no owner and no lasting self inside it. In that clear seeing, the grip of I becomes softer, and a quiet, real freedom starts to appear. Modern science asks the question, what is consciousness? This leads to what philosophers call the hard problem. Science can describe brain activity very clearly, but it still cannot explain why there is experience at all. Why is there something it feels like to see red, to feel pain, to taste sweetness? The aim is to build a complete theory. The method is to study from the outside, using brain scans, experiments, and measurements. The motivation is knowledge, to understand how things work. Buddhism asks a different question. What role does consciousness play in suffering and in freedom? The Buddha did not encourage abstract debates like, is consciousness the same as the body or different from it? He said those views do not lead anywhere useful. The Buddhist goal is not to define what consciousness is in a philosophical sense, but to be free from the way it binds us when mixed with craving and ignorance. The method is to study from the inside, direct observation through meditation. The motivation is very simple and sharp, to end suffering. So science looks at consciousness with curiosity. It finds consciousness fascinating and wants to understand it better. Buddhism looks at consciousness, especially when clung to, as something dangerous. It wants to remove its power over us. Science is like someone watching a snake from a safe distance, studying its patterns, describing its movement. Buddhism is like someone with a snake wrapped around their neck. They are not interested in a perfect theory, they want to get it off. Science offers you a map. Buddhism offers you a vehicle. From the scientific level, consciousness is an object of knowledge. We ask, how does it arise? Which brain regions are involved? How can we model it? From the Buddhist level, consciousness is part of a living process that creates stress or peace. We ask instead, what happens in the mind when I cling to this moment of experience? What happens when I don't? How does this way of relating lead either to more tension or more ease? This does not mean Buddhism is against knowledge. It means that, for the Buddha, knowledge is only truly valuable if it helps reduce suffering. A brilliant theory of consciousness that does not lessen greed, anger, or confusion is still incomplete in the Buddhist sense. Science refines our concepts of consciousness. Buddhism refines our relationship to consciousness. There is also a difference in how causes are seen. Modern science often speaks as if the brain produces consciousness, the way a machine produces an output. Buddhism speaks in terms of conditions meeting. Consciousness is what happens when the right conditions come together. The brain is one very important condition in human life, but not the whole story. From the Buddhist view, in any moment of experience, many conditions meet. A body, a working sense organ, an object, attention, habits, and intentions. When they line up, there is knowing. When one key condition is missing, that particular kind of knowing does not arise. Consciousness is not a solid thing stored somewhere. It is an event that appears and disappears as conditions shift. So at one level, science offers a map of consciousness, models, theories, and descriptions. At another level, Buddhism offers a vehicle, a way to sit down, observe consciousness directly, change how you relate to it, and move toward freedom. Both levels have value, but they serve very different purposes. Understanding the theory is not enough. The Buddha's way is come and see. Look directly into your own experience. Here the practice is vipassana, watching the mind as it moves, moment by moment. Sit quietly, alert but relaxed. Take the breath as a simple anchor, but stay open for whatever appears next. A sound, a sensation, a thought. When a sound comes, notice the interruption. For a brief instant, there is just bare hearing, pure knowing, without name or story. Then the mind adds its automatic comment, pleasant sound or annoying sound. This happens by itself. It is not a personal decision. Here lies the crucial point. Between this automatic evaluation and your reaction, there is a gap. After annoying sound, and before I hate this, there is a tiny open space. If you notice that space as it appears, you can choose not to feed what comes next. You don't do this by pushing anything away. You do it by seeing clearly. This is automatic evaluation, and this is craving starting to arise. When the seeing is clear, the process loses power. Like a small fire that dies out when you add no more wood, the reaction fades on its own. With practice, this becomes more and more visible. At first, you miss the whole chain and only notice much later. After some time, you start catching it just after it has happened. With more training, you begin to see it while it is happening, and sometimes you do not feed it at all. Slowly, the gap feels wider, and there is more choice. This is the beginning of real freedom. You can see the same pattern in daily life. You see something beautiful. Seeing happens, then automatic pleasant. Next, craving moves in. I want this. Try to recognize, this is craving about to pull the mind. At first you see it only after the craving has already taken over. Later you notice it as it arises. With deeper practice, craving may arise but does not stick. The same with pain. Pain itself is part of life. The mind immediately marks it as unpleasant. But I hate this pain, this should not be happening, is extra. The Buddha called pain the first arrow, unavoidable, and our resistance the second arrow, optional. You do not need to make pain pleasant. You only need to stop adding hatred and struggle on top of it. The deeper practice is this. When consciousness arises, do not add clinging. How? Not by force or control, but by clear seeing. This consciousness is not me, not mine. When this is seen directly, not just as an idea, clinging does not take hold so easily. The feeling of carrying a heavy burden starts to fall away. You will know this is working when your reactions feel less solid, and there is more space inside each moment. Emotions still appear, but they pass more quickly. You feel a quiet relief, like taking off a backpack you did not realize was so heavy. This is not dullness or numbness. It is consciousness still working, seeing, hearing, thinking, but no longer driven so strongly by craving and resistance. We usually believe, I am consciousness, or consciousness belongs to me. I use it. But look closely. Are you really in control? Can you stop thoughts from arising? Can you always make an unpleasant mood pleasant just by deciding? Each time you blindly identify, this is me, this is mine, you strengthen old patterns and give them more power. So the real question is not only, what is consciousness, but what is my relationship to consciousness right now? Am I caught in it, or beginning to be free? Knowing about consciousness can be helpful, but it is not the heart of the path. What matters most is loosening the grip of identification with it. When consciousness is no longer fed by constant clinging, it becomes simple and clear. It continues to function. You still see, hear, think, but without the pressure to protect and build up me, mine, I am. This is not emptiness as a cold nothing. It is a lightness, a freedom from the inner struggle. The Udana says, there is the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. This points to a dimension of peace that appears when the mind stops building and defending a solid self moment after moment. In that peace, consciousness is just a natural process, arising, knowing, and passing without chains. So is consciousness your tool or your master? For most people, it quietly acts as the master, and they serve their habits without seeing it. As wisdom grows, consciousness is no longer tool or master, just something understood, something that comes and goes. The invitation is clear. Come and see for yourself. Practice, observe, see the process, notice the gap. Stop feeding what harms you. Let the mind release its grip. This teaching is not here to give you more concepts. It is here to guide you toward direct seeing. Not to build a stronger me, but to lay down the burden of me. And in that laying down, there is peace.